The vast observation deck of Arcanus The-7 space station offered an unparalleled view of the spiral galaxy. But Dr. Cale Morn barely registered the celestial spectacle. His attention remained fixed on the holographic display hovering before the War Council. The three-dimensional tactical map showed Earth's solar system in exquisite detail, a system that would soon feel the might of the Arcanis Empire. The subjugation of Earth will proceed according to standard protocols, General Sarn Vel announced, his voice echoing through the chamber with practiced authority. The general's imposing figure cast a long shadow across the polished obsidian floor as he gestured toward the hologram. Our Fourth Fleet stands ready to deploy. Dr. Cale studied the projection thoughtfully. As the Empire's leading weapons engineer, his opinion carried considerable weight, even in this assembly of military leaders. "And the weapons transfer?" he inquired, adjusting his slate-gray uniform. "Already underway," Vel responded with a dismissive wave. "As per your recommendation, we've distributed our previous generation defense systems to their military installations. Class 3 energy shields, Mark II plasma cannons, all sufficiently outdated by our standards." A murmur of approval rippled through the council. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Provide Earth's fractious nations with weapons, advanced enough to cease their internal conflicts, but insufficient to pose any threat to Arcanis technology. A humanitarian gesture before inevitable conquest. "The humans should consider themselves fortunate," remarked Vel, his lips curling into what passed for a smile among the Arcanis. "Few species receive such generosity before assimilation." Cale nodded, though something about the general's confidence troubled him. "The psychological impact cannot be understated," he offered. "By giving them a taste of our technology, we've established our superiority while appearing benevolent. They will understand resistance is futile before the first shot is fired." "Precisely why I supported your proposal, Doctor," Vel conceded, "though I maintain that a direct approach would be more efficient." "Perhaps," Cale replied carefully, "but efficiency isn't always—" "The Sovereign Council has made its decision," interrupted Councillor Aristharn, her voice cutting through the debate like a precision laser. "The Fourth Fleet departs in 6 cycles. Earth will be incorporated into the Empire by the turn of the solar year." Cale bowed his head in deference. "Of course, Counselor." As the meeting adjourned, Cale lingered by the holographic display, studying the small blue planet that had unwittingly become the Empire's next target. Something about this world stirred an unusual sense of curiosity within him. The reports indicated a species of remarkable diversity and adaptability, albeit technologically primitive. What might they accomplish with proper guidance, he wondered, rather than subjugation? Such thoughts bordered on heresy. Of course, the Arcanis way was clear: assimilate, standardize, advance. Yet as he watched the holographic Earth slowly rotate, Cale couldn't shake the feeling that they were overlooking something important about these humans. "Contemplating your handiwork, Doctor?" The voice belonged to Lieutenant General Lynn Arax, Vel's second-in-command, and one of the few military officers Cale genuinely respected. "Just considering variables," Cale replied carefully. Arax moved beside him, her gaze also fixed on the hologram. "You know, I've studied their historical conflicts. Fascinating adaptability in the face of technological disadvantage. That's precisely why we're giving them standardized weapons," Cale explained. "To eliminate unpredictable tactics." "Perhaps," Arax said softly, "though I wonder if we're not merely teaching them our weaknesses." The comment lingered in Cale's mind, long after Arax had departed. An absurd notion, surely. What could primitives possibly learn from obsolete technology that the Empire's finest engineers hadn't already improved upon threefold? Still, as Cale left the observation deck, he made a mental note to review the latest intelligence reports on human military adaptations. Merely due diligence, he told himself. Nothing more.
Uh,
3 orbital cycles later, Dr. Cale Morn was summoned abruptly from his laboratory. The urgent tone of the communication left no doubt that something significant had occurred. When he arrived at the command center, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. General Vell stood rigid before the main tactical display, his expression carved from stone. Around him, officers worked in uncharacteristic silence, the usual methodical efficiency of an Arcanist command center, replaced by what Cale could only interpret as uncertainty. "You requested my presence, General?" Cale asked, approaching cautiously. Vell didn't turn immediately. When he finally did, his eyes burned with barely contained fury. "The Fourth Fleet has gone silent." The statement hung in the air, its implications too severe to process immediately. The Fourth Fleet, 26 warships, the pride of Arcanist military engineering, gone silent. "Communications interference?" Cale suggested, reaching for the most benign explanation. "For an entire fleet," Vell's voice was dangerously quiet. "Simultaneously? Don't insult my intelligence, Doctor." Cale felt a chill spread through his core. "What's the last confirmed communication?" A junior officer answered, her voice carefully controlled. "Standard positioning report from the flagship Indomitable, 18 hours ago. They had entered Earth's outer solar system and were deploying in attack formation." "And then?" "Nothing, Doctor. Complete communication blackout across all vessels." Vell's hand slammed against the console. "This is impossible. Those ships carry redundant communication systems. Even in catastrophic failure, emergency beacons would activate." "Unless they were specifically targeted," Kyle mused aloud, his analytical mind already assembling possibilities. "By humans?" Vell's incredulity bordered on outrage. "With the outdated technology we provided them?" Cale's response was measured. "We should consider all possibilities until we have concrete data." "Then get me that data," Vell demanded. "The Sovereign Council wants answers, and I won't appear before them empty-handed." "You advocated for this approach, Doctor. Now your expertise is required to explain how primitives could possibly silence an Arcanist battle fleet. I'll need access to all intelligence from Earth, particularly any analysis of how they've been utilizing our provided technology." "You'll have whatever you need," Vell replied coldly, "but I expect preliminary findings within one cycle." As Cale departed, Lynn Arax fell into step beside him. "The General is—" she began. "Frightened," Cale finished quietly. "As he should be. If humans have somehow neutralized our fleet with inferior technology, we've severely miscalculated." "Or perhaps you gave them more credit than others did," Arax suggested. "I recall your interest in their adaptability." Cale glanced at her sharply. "Are you implying I anticipated this outcome?" "No," she replied evenly. "I'm suggesting you might be uniquely positioned to understand it." Hours later, sequestered in a secure analysis chamber, Cale studied the incoming data with growing fascination and alarm. The Arcani's observation posts around Earth's solar system had captured fragments of information, weapon signatures, energy readings, and scattered communications, before they too had fallen silent. What emerged painted an astonishing picture. The humans hadn't simply deployed the gifted weapons. They had disassembled them, studied them, and reconfigured them in ways the Arcani's engineers had never considered. They'd cannibalized the power cores from shield generators to supercharge the plasma cannons. They'd reprogrammed the targeting algorithms to create resonance patterns that could penetrate Arcani's shields through precise frequency matching. Most ingeniously, they'd utilized the Arcani's communication network itself as a vector for attack, sending cascading data packets that overwhelmed and paralyzed the fleet's command systems. "They shouldn't have been capable of this," Kyle muttered to himself, reviewing the evidence for the third time. Not with their technological base, not in the time frame given. Yet the data was irrefutable. Somehow, These humans had taken Arcanus castoffs and transformed them into weapons that could challenge current-generation Imperial technology. When Kale presented his findings to General Vell and the hastily assembled Crisis Committee, the reception was predictably hostile. "Impossible," declared Admiral Thex, head of fleet operations. "You're suggesting primitives reverse-engineered centuries of Arcanus development in mere months?" "Not reverse-engineered," Kale clarified. "Repurposed. They didn't need to understand the fundamental principles of our technology. They simply found creative applications we hadn't considered." Vell paced the length of the conference table. "Creative applications," he repeated with disdain. "You make it sound like artistry rather than warfare." "In a sense, it is," Kale replied, warming to the subject despite the tense atmosphere. "Our technological development follows established patterns. Methodical, incremental improvements based on foundational theories. The humans appear to operate differently, making intuitive leaps, combining disparate elements without regard for theoretical constraints." "That's not science," scoffed another officer. "That's desperation." "Perhaps desperation breeds innovation," Kale suggested. "Their historical records show remarkable technological acceleration during periods of conflict." Vell stopped pacing abruptly. "Enough theorizing. What is your assessment of our current tactical position? Can the defensive line hold?" Kale hesitated. "Based on the data, I believe—" An urgent communication interrupted his response. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a harried officer from the nearest observation post at the edge of Earth's solar system. "General, we're under attack. Chemical rockets, primitive design but somehow penetrating our shields. They're—" The transmission dissolved into static. Silence fell over the conference room, heavy and profound. "Chemical rockets," Vell finally said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "They're attacking an Arcanus observation post with chemical rockets, retrofitted with our shield frequency modulators. Most likely," Kyle observed, studying the brief sensor readings transmitted before communications failed. "Crude but effective, like using a stone key in a quantum lock." Vell's expression hardened. "I want every available intelligence asset focused on Earth. I want to know exactly what they've done with our technology, how they're deploying it, and where their primary military installations are located. We'll assemble a response fleet immediately." "General," Kyle interjected, "perhaps we should consider—" "Your consideration has cost us a fleet. Doctor." Vell cut him off sharply. "From this point forward, we proceed according to standard military protocols." As the council dispersed to implement Vell's orders, Lynn Arax approached Kale quietly. "You were about to suggest an alternative approach?" Kale nodded cautiously. "If they've achieved this much with obsolete technology, a direct military confrontation may prove unpredictable." "You're suggesting negotiation?" Her voice remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed genuine curiosity. "I'm suggesting we reassess our understanding of human capabilities before committing additional resources to a potentially flawed strategy." Arax glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Submit your analysis directly to Counselor Tharn. She has always valued your perspective, even when others dismiss it as theoretical." "And what of General Vell?" A ghost of a smile crossed Arax's features. "The General is a brilliant tactician within established parameters. Perhaps these humans have created a situation beyond those parameters." The subsequent weeks brought a steady stream of disturbing reports. 3 more observation posts had gone silent. A scout vessel reported encountering primitive Earth vessels, retrofitted with Arcanus propulsion systems, giving them unexpected speed and maneuverability. Most alarmingly, long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures emanating from Earth's lunar satellite, signatures consistent with advanced weapons testing. In the heart of the Arcanus The-7 Strategic Command Center, General Vell presided over an increasingly desperate war council. "They're adapting faster than anticipated," he admitted, reviewing the latest intelligence. Our standard containment protocols are proving insufficient. Dr. Cale Morn, now officially assigned as Chief Technological Analyst for the Earth Crisis, studied the holographic battle projections with growing concern. The simulations showed a disturbing trend. Each Arcana's tactical advantage neutralized in succession as humans rapidly developed countermeasures. Their learning curve is unprecedented, Cale observed. They're not simply copying our technology. They're evolving it along unexpected pathways. Vel's expression darkened. Spare me your academic admiration, Doctor. These creatures are dismantling the foundations of an empire that has stood for 10,000 years. Not dismantling, Cale corrected carefully. Challenging. There's a distinction that may prove significant. Explain, demanded Counselor Tharn, who had joined the session remotely from the capital. Cale rose, approaching the central hologram. The humans aren't attempting to replicate our civilization or our technological paradigm. They're selectively adapting elements that serve their immediate needs while maintaining their own developmental direction. He manipulated the display, highlighting intercepted communications and sensor readings. Look here, they've modified our shield generators but retained their own targeting systems. Here, they've integrated our power cores with their chemical propellants. It's a hybrid approach that we never considered because it violates our design philosophies. And how does this distinction help us prevail? Vel inquired, his patience visibly thinning. It suggests they're not seeking conquest but survival, Cale replied. Their actions are defensive in nature, focused on neutralizing our specific advantages, rather than projecting power beyond their system. A cornered animal is still dangerous, Vel countered. Yes, but it can be negotiated with, Kyle pressed. If we recognize their primary motivation as self-preservation rather than aggression, diplomatic avenues become viable. The suggestion was met with uncomfortable silence. Negotiation with lesser species was not the Arcanist way, especially not with species that had inflicted damage on Imperial forces. The Sovereign Council would never approve such a departure from protocol, Admiral Thex stated flatly. They might, Counselor Tharn interjected, surprising everyone. If the alternative is continued military embarrassment, our inability to quickly subjugate Earth is already raising questions throughout the Empire. Vel's jaw tightened visibly. What would you have us do? Extend formal recognition to primitives who've barely mastered space travel? I would have us adapt, Tharn replied calmly. As these humans have adapted, pride serves no purpose if it leads to defeat. We are not defeated, Vel thundered, rising to his full height. We have merely encountered unexpected resistance. The full might of the Empire has yet to be deployed. At what cost, General? Kyle asked quietly. Every engagement increases their understanding of our technology. Time favors them, not us. The debate might have continued indefinitely had an urgent communication not interrupted the proceedings. The holographic projector flickered, then stabilized to reveal the stern face of an unfamiliar human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. This message is addressed to the leadership of the Arcanis Empire, she began, speaking flawless Imperial standard, a feat that alone caused a ripple of shock through the assembly. I am Admiral Elena Reyes of the United Earth Defense Force. We request a diplomatic meeting to discuss the cessation of hostilities and establishment of peaceful relations between our peoples. The transmission continued, specifying coordinates on Earth's lunar satellite and proposing security protocols for both delegations. When it concluded, the War Council erupted into chaotic discussion. How did they access our secure communication channels? Demanded Admiral Thex. More importantly, how did they learn our language? Added another officer. Cale remained silent, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. Not only had the humans deciphered Arcanist technology, but they'd also mastered the Empire's notoriously complex language structure, a feat that typically took conquered species generations to achieve with Imperial assistance. It's a trap, Vel declared definitively. They seek to lure our leadership into an ambush. Perhaps, Kale acknowledged. But consider the alternative. They genuinely wish to negotiate. If so, this represents an unprecedented opportunity to resolve the situation without further losses. Losses we cannot afford, Councillor Tharn reminded them. The Sovereign Council is growing impatient with the lack of progress. Vel paced the circumference of the holographic projector, his internal conflict evident in every rigid movement. Finally, he stopped, facing Kale directly. You believe these humans are sincere? Kale chose his words carefully. I believe they are rational actors pursuing their best interests. If they've calculated that negotiation serves those interests better than continued conflict, their offer may be genuine. And if you're wrong, then we will have lost nothing but time, a resource that, as I've noted, currently favors them. After a tense deliberation, a compromise was reached. A delegation would be sent to the proposed coordinates, the lunar installation the humans called Alpha Base. General Vel would lead the military contingent, with Dr. Kale Morn attending as the technical authority, and Councillor Tharn participating remotely to provide political oversight. As preparations began, Lynn Arax sought out Kale in his laboratory. You've achieved what many thought impossible, she remarked. You've convinced Vel to consider diplomacy. Kale continued calibrating his analytical instruments, which he insisted on bringing to the meeting. The general is pragmatic beneath his orthodoxy. He recognizes an untenable situation. Is that what this is? Untenable? Arax studied him carefully. Or is it something more profound? A fundamental challenge to our assumptions? Kale paused, looking up from his work. What are you suggesting, Lieutenant General? That perhaps these humans represent more than a tactical problem. Perhaps they represent an evolutionary branch we never explored, a different way of thinking that could benefit the Empire if we're wise enough to recognize its value. The observation struck uncomfortably close to Kale's private thoughts. Such speculation borders on ideological revision, he cautioned. Arax smiled faintly. Which is precisely why I'm sharing it with you rather than the general. Your curiosity has always outweighed your orthodoxy. Doctor, that makes you dangerous and valuable. Before Kale could respond, an alert signaled the final preparations for departure. The moment for philosophical discussions had passed. Now, they would face these adaptable humans directly, and Kale would finally see whether his theories about their nature proved correct. Alpha Base, as the humans called it, defied Arcanus' expectations from the moment their diplomatic shuttle entered lunar orbit. Rather than the gleaming monument to technology that characterized Imperial outposts, the lunar facility appeared cobbled together from mismatched components, repurposed cargo containers, retrofitted spacecraft segments, and hastily constructed habitation modules. Yet sensors revealed sophisticated energy signatures beneath this haphazard exterior. The base's shield system utilized modified Arcanis technology, but operated at efficiency levels that exceeded Imperial benchmarks. Weapons emplacements were cleverly concealed within what appeared to be routine infrastructure. As the Arcanis delegation disembarked in the base's pressurized hangar bay, Dr. Kale Morn observed everything with intense fascination. General Vel, by contrast, maintained a rigid posture of barely concealed disdain. Primitive, he muttered as they passed through a corridor fashioned from what appeared to be shipping containers. They live like nomads. Adaptive, Kale countered quietly. They build with available materials rather than waiting for ideal components. Note how they've integrated our shield harmonics into their life support systems, an application we never considered. Before Vel could respond, they were greeted by a delegation of humans led by the same woman who had delivered the communication. Admiral Elena Reyes stood slightly shorter than the Arcanis representatives, but carried herself with unmistakable authority. General Vel Dr. Morn, she acknowledged them with a precise nod. Welcome to Alpha Base. We appreciate your willingness to engage in diplomatic dialogue. Her perfect pronunciation of their language remained disconcerting. Vel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your facility is interesting, Admiral Reyes, though perhaps not what we expected from a species proposing diplomatic relations with the Empire." If the barb affected her, Reyes showed no sign. "We work with what we have, General, a philosophy that has served humanity well, particularly in recent months." The subtle reference to their successful resistance hung in the air between them. "Perhaps we should proceed to the conference area," suggested Kale, sensing the building tension. Reyes nodded. "Of course. If you'll follow me, we've prepared a demonstration that may provide context for our discussions." "Demonstration?" Vel's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, stopping only when Kale placed a restraining hand on his arm. "A technical presentation," Reyes clarified, seemingly unperturbed by the reaction. "We believe it's important for you to understand our perspective on the current situation." They were led through a series of corridors into what appeared to be a command center. Unlike the exterior of the base, this room featured sleek, integrated systems, many clearly derived from Arcanus designs, but modified in ways that suggested both creative adaptation and fundamental misunderstanding of their original purpose. A circular table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by representatives from what Kale recognized as Earth's various political factions. The fragmented nature of human governance had been one factor in the Empire's assessment of them as an easily conquered species. Now, seeing them united in this room, Kale wondered if that fragmentation might actually be a source of strength, generating diverse approaches to problems rather than the standardized solutions favored by the Empire. "Before we begin formal negotiations," Reyes announced as they took their seats, "we want to demonstrate why we believe peaceful coexistence is the only rational path forward. What you're about to witness has been designated Phase Alpha by our Joint Defense Council." She nodded to a technician, who activated a holographic display above the table. It showed real-time footage of lunar orbit, where the Arcani's diplomatic vessel maintained position under heavy guard by Imperial escorts. "The most advanced warship in your current fleet," Reyes observed, indicating one of the escorts, a Sovereign-class destroyer that represented the pinnacle of Arcanus military technology. Triple-layered quantum shields, phased array energy weapons, and a crew of over 2,000 of your finest officers. Vel's expression darkened. "If this is meant to be threatening, Admiral—" "Not threatening, General, illuminating." Reyes nodded again to her technician, who activated a small device on the table. It appeared almost trivial, a handheld unit no larger than a communication pad. On the holographic display, the impossible occurred. The Sovereign-class destroyer's shields flickered, pulsed, and then collapsed entirely. The mighty vessel drifted helplessly, its main power systems visibly offline. Vel surged to his feet. "This is an act of war!" "This is a demonstration," Reyes corrected calmly. "Your vessel is unharmed. Power and shields will be restored in precisely 60 seconds. Kale stared at the device on the table, his scientific mind already dissecting its possible functioning. "Resonance cascade," he murmured. "You've identified the fundamental frequency pattern in our shield matrix and exploited the interference nodes." "A crude description, but essentially accurate," confirmed a human scientist seated near Reyes. "We call it the lockpick principle, using your own energy patterns to create a key that opens your defenses." True to Reyes's word, the destroyer's systems reactivated after exactly 1 minute. The ship quickly resumed its defensive posture, but the damage to Arcanus' prestige had been done. "You see our dilemma," Reyes continued, addressing the stunned Arcanus delegation. "We did not seek this conflict. You provided us with technology you considered obsolete, presumably as a prelude to conquest. We simply studied it, understood it, and improved upon it according to our own paradigms." "Impossible," Vel insisted. though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Those shield designs incorporate principles your species couldn't possibly comprehend. We don't need to comprehend them fully to utilize them effectively, Reyes replied. That's something your empire seems to have forgotten. Understanding and application are distinct skills. Kale found himself nodding, despite the diplomatic tension. You've taken components designed for specific purposes and reconfigured them without regard for their original intent. Exactly. Dr. Morn. We work with what we have. When faced with overwhelming technological superiority, we adapted rather than surrendered. As the implications settled over the delegation, Kale realized the full magnitude of their miscalculation. The Empire had given humans tools, assuming they would use them as designed, becoming dependent on Arcanist paradigms and, by extension, vulnerable to Arcanist control. Instead, the humans had dismantled those tools, extracting principles and recombining them according to their own needs and understanding. They hadn't become more like the Arcanis. They had become more dangerously themselves. "What are your terms?" Vel finally asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. Reyes's expression remained professionally neutral. Recognition of Earth's sovereign status and non-interference in our affairs. Technological exchange on mutually beneficial terms. Designation of our solar system as protected territory under whatever diplomatic framework governs your relations with independent worlds. The Empire does not recognize independent worlds, Vel responded automatically. Then perhaps it's time for new paradigms, suggested Reyes. As we've demonstrated, the alternative would be costly for both our peoples. The negotiations proceeded for hours, with Vel resisting every concession, while Kale found himself increasingly intrigued by the human approach to problem-solving. They didn't think linearly or hierarchically as the Arcanis did. Their solutions emerged from seemingly chaotic collaboration, with ideas building upon each other in unpredictable patterns. When the initial session concluded, the Arcanis delegation withdrew to their vessel to confer with the Sovereign Council. As they departed, Kyle lingered briefly, studying the makeshift construction of the lunar base with new appreciation. "Curious about our methods, Dr. Morn?" The voice belonged to Reyes, who had noticed his interest. "Your approach defies conventional engineering principles," Kale acknowledged, "yet achieves results that challenge our assumptions. Human history is filled with making do," she explained, "using available resources in unexpected ways. Your empire gave us sophisticated tools but limited instruction. That forced us to understand the underlying principles rather than simply following prescribed applications. A fortunate limitation, it seems." Reyes studied him with unexpected intensity. "There's a theory among our anthropologists that advanced civilizations often lose the capacity for radical innovation precisely because they no longer face resource constraints. When every tool is available, creativity atrophies." The observation struck Kale with uncomfortable precision. The Empire's technological development had indeed plateaued in recent centuries, with improvements becoming increasingly incremental rather than revolutionary. "An interesting hypothesis," he replied carefully. "One that might merit further investigation. Perhaps that could be part of our exchange," Reyes suggested. "Not just technology, but perspective." Before Kale could respond, General Vel called sharply from the hangar entrance. With a respectful nod to the Admiral, Kale rejoined his delegation, his mind racing with implications that extended far beyond the current crisis. Aboard the diplomatic vessel, Vel's fury finally found full expression. "This is humiliation, not negotiation," he raged, pacing the conference chamber. "They parade their stolen technology before us and expect us to recognize them as equals?" "The demonstration was persuasive," Kale noted, earning a withering glare from the general. "It was theatrical posturing," Vel insisted. "One device affecting one ship does not prove they could withstand the full might of the Empire." Perhaps not, Kale conceded. But it does prove they could exact a cost higher than the Sovereign Council might be willing to pay. The holographic projector activated, revealing Councillor Tharn's stern visage. The Council has reviewed the preliminary reports and the demonstration footage, she announced without preamble. They find the situation concerning. Councillor, with additional forces, we could still, Vel began. The Council is not interested in committing additional resources to what increasingly appears to be a miscalculation. Tharn interrupted. Dr. Morn's initial assessment of human adaptability has proven more accurate than we anticipated. Kale carefully maintained a neutral expression, though vindication bloomed within him. We cannot retreat before primitives, Vel protested, though his tone had moderated in the presence of the counselor. The precedent would be disastrous. More disastrous than committing our fleets to a protracted conflict with an unpredictable opponent? Tharn countered. The Empire's strength lies in calculated expansion. General, this situation no longer offers favorable calculations. The discussion continued for hours, with Vel arguing passionately for military action while Tharn methodically dismantled his proposals with cold pragmatism. Throughout, Kale provided technical analysis that increasingly supported the diplomatic approach, not from political conviction but from scientific assessment of the evidence. Finally, Tharn delivered the Council's decision. The Empire would negotiate a settlement with Earth, recognizing its territorial sovereignty while establishing protocols for limited technological exchange. The humans would be classified under a rarely used designation, emergent independent entity, neither subject nor ally, but a civilization to be monitored rather than controlled. This is unprecedented, Vel muttered as the transmission ended. As is their resistance, Kale reminded him. Unprecedented situations require unprecedented responses. You seem almost pleased, Doctor. Kale considered his response carefully. I am intrigued by the possibilities. These humans approach problems differently than we do. Their solutions may offer insights that could benefit the Empire in ways we haven't considered. Now you sound like Arax, Vel said dismissively. Next, you'll suggest we should learn from them, rather than teach them. Perhaps we should do both, Kale suggested quietly. The negotiations that followed spanned weeks, with each side maneuvering for advantage, while establishing the framework for an uneasy coexistence. Throughout the process, Kyle found himself increasingly fascinated by human cognitive patterns. They argued passionately over points the Arcanis considered trivial, while easily conceding issues that seemed fundamental to Imperial negotiators. Their decision-making process appeared chaotic, with representatives frequently disagreeing publicly before reaching consensus through what seemed like contentious debate rather than logical progression. Yet the outcomes of these seemingly disordered processes often displayed surprising wisdom. As the final agreements took shape, Kyle was appointed as the technical liaison for the Limited Exchange Program, a position that would allow him to study human innovation directly while monitoring their technological development for potential threats to Imperial security. When he informed Admiral Reyes of his appointment, she responded with what he had come to recognize as a smile, a human expression that conveyed multiple emotional states simultaneously. We look forward to working with you, Dr. Morn, she said. I think you'll find our research facilities unconventional by your standards. Unconventionality appears to be humanity's defining characteristic, Kyle observed. One of many, Reyes replied. We're contradictory by nature, cooperative yet competitive, rational yet emotional, traditional yet innovative. It makes us difficult to categorize, and therefore difficult to predict, Kale added. A quality the Empire finds challenging. But not you. Kale hesitated, aware that his response might be reported to Imperial authorities. Yet something about this human's direct approach invited honesty. I find it stimulating, he admitted. The Arcanis approach to knowledge is systematic and comprehensive, but it may have limitations we've failed to recognize. Your species' cognitive diversity offers a different pathway to discovery. A diplomatic way of saying we think strangely, Reyes said with another smile. Differently, Kyle corrected. Whether that difference represents advancement or regression remains to be seen. On the final day of negotiations, as the formal protocols were prepared for signature, General Vell approached Kale on the observation deck of the Arcanis vessel. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the blue-green sphere of Earth through the viewport. The Council has approved your extended assignment, Vell said finally, though I registered my objection. I'm aware, Kale replied. Your concerns about security are valid. It's not just security, Vell admitted, surprising Kale with his candor. It's ideological contamination. These humans, they don't respect proper hierarchies of knowledge. They mix disciplines, ignore established methodologies, question fundamentals that have been settled for millennia. And yet they neutralized our fleet with salvaged components, Kale pointed out gently. Vell's expression hardened. A temporary advantage gained through desperation. It doesn't validate their approach. Perhaps not, Kale conceded. But it suggests there may be value in understanding it. Be careful, Doctor, Vell warned, turning to face him directly. Curiosity has destroyed as many civilizations as complacency. Remember your duty to the Empire. Always, Kyle assured him, though privately he wondered if that duty might be better served by embracing new perspectives rather than defending against them. As the human delegation boarded the Arcanis vessel for the formal signing ceremony, Kyle observed their interactions with Imperial staff. While most Arcanis personnel maintained professional distance, he noticed several engineers engaged in animated discussions with their human counterparts, examining equipment and exchanging observations with growing enthusiasm. Ideas were already flowing across the boundaries they had so carefully established, not through formal channels, but through the natural curiosity of minds encountering novel concepts. Admiral Reyes noticed his attention and approached. Your engineers seem interested in our modifications to your communication systems. As they should be, Kyle acknowledged. You've achieved transmission efficiencies that exceed our standard protocols by bypassing several layers we considered essential. Sometimes constraints foster creativity, she observed. When you can't build the ideal solution, you find unexpected paths to adequate ones. The insight resonated with Kale's own developing theories. A principle the Empire may need to rediscover, he suggested cautiously. Reyes studied him, with that penetrating gaze that seemed to characterize human leaders. You're unusual for an Arcanis, Dr. Morn. Most of your colleagues view deviation from established patterns as inherently flawed. Pattern recognition is valuable, Kale replied, but pattern transcendence may be equally so. A dangerous perspective in a hierarchical empire, she noted. Perhaps essential for its continued evolution. As the formal ceremony concluded, and the new era of human-Arcanis relations officially began, Kale found himself standing at what felt like a personal crossroads as well as a historical one. His assignment to Earth would place him at the interface between two profoundly different approaches to knowledge and development. Would he maintain the Empire's perspective, categorizing and controlling human innovation within established frameworks? Or would he allow himself to be influenced by their chaotic creativity, possibly discovering new dimensions to his own thinking? As the first human technical delegation prepared to board the Arcanis C7 station to begin the exchange program, Kyle watched them with a mixture of scientific curiosity and philosophical uncertainty. They're remarkably adaptable, observed Lynn Arax, who had joined him in the observation lounge. Yes, Kale agreed. Though I wonder if we've merely accelerated a process that would have occurred naturally. What process is that? The emergence of a formidable intelligence following a different evolutionary path than our own. By giving them our outdated weapons, we may have catalyzed a developmental leap that would have taken them centuries to achieve independently. Arax considered this soberly. If that's true, have we created an eventual rival to the Empire? Kale watched as the human technicians examined the station's architecture with obvious fascination, already identifying connections and possibilities that the Arcani's designers had never intended. Perhaps, he acknowledged, or perhaps we've encountered something rarer and more valuable, a species that can teach us to see beyond our own assumptions. The general would consider that perspective dangerously radical, Arax warned, though her tone suggested she didn't necessarily disagree. The general operates within established parameters, Kale replied. These humans have demonstrated that parameters can be rewritten. As the first joint research projects began taking shape, Kyle immersed himself in understanding the human approach to problem solving, where Arcanis engineers built complex systems from fundamental principles. Humans often assembled functional solutions from disparate components with limited theoretical understanding. Where Imperial scientists advanced methodically from hypothesis to conclusion, humans leapt intuitively between possibilities, following promising failures as readily as partial successes. The results were unpredictable, frequently flawed, occasionally brilliant, and never quite what either species would have produced independently. New technologies emerged from the collaboration, hybrid approaches that combined Arcana's precision with human adaptability. 6 months into the exchange program, as Kyle prepared his report for the Sovereign Council, he reflected on the question that had troubled him since their first encounter with Earth. Had they created a future threat to the Empire, or had they discovered a necessary catalyst for Imperial evolution? The answer remained uncertain. What was clear, however, was that the humans would continue to surprise them. They had taken outdated weapons and transformed them into tools of survival. What might they accomplish with genuine collaboration? As Kale watched a team of human and Arcanis engineers testing a new propulsion system that combined elements from both civilizations' technologies, he allowed himself a moment of uncharacteristic speculation. Perhaps the Empire's greatest strength wasn't its accumulated knowledge or its military might, but its capacity, still unproven, to recognize value in difference rather than demanding uniformity. The humans had feared Arcana's tactics but adapted their weapons. Now, perhaps, the Empire would learn to fear human creativity and adapt its thinking. In the vastness of the galaxy, with countless civilizations following countless paths of development, such adaptation might prove not merely advantageous, but essential for any species hoping to endure the long arc of cosmic history. For Dr. Kale Morn, watching the improbable collaboration unfold before him, one thing became increasingly certain. They had not conquered Earth as planned, but they may have gained something far more valuable than another subjugated world. They had gained a new perspective,